America's fast food powerhouse is unraveling right in front of us. Brands that once seemed untouchable are suddenly closing locations at a speed that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Revenue is plunging, franchise owners are filing for bankruptcy, and some familiar names are quietly vanishing altogether. This goes way beyond a rough patch for the restaurant industry. It feels more like a red flag being raised across the entire country. Because when even the biggest, most recognizable chains can't stay afloat, it suggests something much deeper and more troubling is happening to America as a whole. Number 12. Applebee's. Applebee's was never meant to be a failure story. For decades, it was everywhere. It was the go-to suburban routine, the Friday night dinner spot, the familiar booth where middle-class families gathered because it felt comfortable, predictable, and within reach. It was safe, it was familiar, it was affordable. And yet, somehow, in less than 10 years, this once iconic chain has started coming apart in a way that feels almost unreal. Since 2017, Applebee's has closed close to 300 locations nationwide. That kind of contraction is shocking for a brand that once promised endless expansion and seemed woven into everyday American life. But each shutdown carries its own harsh reality. Dining rooms sit empty, managers/employee hours just to stay afloat. Franchise owners plead with landlords for temporary rent relief, hoping to buy a little more time. The financial pressure is relentless. A single store remodel can run anywhere from $400,000 to $600,000. But many locations no longer generate enough revenue to make that kind of investment remotely sensible. Some owners don't even try anymore. They hand over the keys and walk away. Others hang on by a thread, waiting for the next lease payment to finally push them under. But the real story goes deeper than poor management or bad timing. Applebee's didn't fail in isolation. The country around it shifted. When the price of a simple dinner for a family of 4 jumps from $35 to $65, customers stop showing up. When insurance costs, rent, and wages rise faster than menu prices ever could, profit margins disappear. And when middle-class households lose the ability to afford small indulgences, chains like Applebee's are the first to feel the damage. Across entire suburbs, former Applebee's locations now sit dark and silent. Neon signs are unplugged. Parking lots are empty. Windows are boarded up, resembling abandoned department stores rather than neighborhood restaurants. It's unsettling to see because Applebee's was never just a place to eat. It was a measuring stick for the American middle class. Its decline points to something far larger than a struggling franchise. It reflects a country where everyday families can no longer afford everyday meals, where businesses that once felt stable can't withstand new economic pressures, and where iconic brands don't fall with dramatic headlines, but with a quiet, closed permanently sign taped to the front door. Number 11. IHOP. IHOP used to feel invincible. It was the breakfast heavyweight that never seemed concerned about rivals, because pancakes, eggs, and coffee were supposed to be immune to economic downturns. Breakfast was considered a safe bet. But by 2025, that belief completely fell apart. That year, sales dropped sharply across major U.S. markets, revealing weaknesses the brand had been overlooking for a long time. While more than 100 IHOP locations have shut their doors since 2020, 2025 marked a turning point. For the first time, franchise owners reported double-digit sales declines across multiple regions at once, and that set off alarms. At the heart of the problem is unforgiving math. Breakfast inflation hit harder than almost any other meal category. Eggs, dairy, and wheat, the foundation of IHOP's menu, skyrocketed in price. To keep up, menu prices climbed fast. A pancake stack that once cost around $6 now runs $11 to $13 in many cities. Families aren't willing or able to keep paying that. As a result, morning traffic, the lifeblood of the brand, has fallen to its lowest level in more than 10 years. Franchise operators describe the situation as a full-blown crisis. Rent continues to rise. Utility bills are higher than ever. Staffing shortages make operations harder and more expensive. On top of all that, corporate-mandated remodels can cost over $350,000 per location. For many owners, pouring more money into stores that are already losing cash simply doesn't make sense anymore. Some franchises have shut down almost overnight. Communities wake up to locked doors, dark dining rooms, and empty IHOP signs where a familiar restaurant stood just days before. There's no warning, just silence. IHOP was built around comfort and routine. Late-night meals after studying, early Sunday breakfasts, big family tables filled with coffee cups and pancakes. Seeing it disappear doesn't just feel like another restaurant closing, it feels like a sign of something bigger. A country where even small, familiar pleasures are slipping out of reach. IHOP isn't fading because its food suddenly got worse. It's struggling because the country around it changed. The sales collapse of 2025 made it clear that inflation, shrinking disposable income, and shifting dining habits have broken the business model that sustained IHOP for generations. The decline of this American breakfast icon isn't theoretical anymore. It's already happening, and it's accelerating. Number 10. Jack in the Box. Jack in the Box is going through one of the harshest regional breakdowns in the entire U.S. fast food landscape. In 2025, the chain reported steep sales declines across California, Washington, and Oregon, states that once defined the brand's identity and fueled its growth. For the first time in years, franchise groups publicly acknowledged what had been whispered behind closed doors. Dozens of locations simply no longer make financial sense. Crime has become a central problem. Late-night service, which used to be Jack in the Box's most profitable window, has all but collapsed. Operators now say that once the clock hits 8 p.m., staying open often turns into a risk instead of an opportunity. Rising wages, soaring insurance premiums, and the added cost of security have wiped out what little margin remained. Even stores in traditionally strong areas struggle to justify staying open past midnight. A crushing hit to a brand built around late-night crowds. Closures are picking up speed. Over the past 3 years, multiple franchise groups have filed for bankruptcy, and the revenue slump in 2025 pushed many of the remaining operators to the edge. In certain urban corridors, entire stretches of Jack in the Box locations have disappeared, leaving behind empty buildings covered in "for lease" signs. At its core, the problem is structural. Jack in the Box relies on dense, high-volume urban traffic to survive. But when major cities are overwhelmed by homelessness, rising crime, surging rents, and labor shortages, the math stops working. A single remodel can cost as much as $600,000, an expense that struggling franchise owners simply can't justify anymore. For millions of people on the West Coast, Jack in the Box wasn't just a restaurant. It was a late-night ritual. Cheap tacos, burgers, and milkshakes after long shifts or nights out were part of the region's rhythm. Watching the chain shrink feels like watching a piece of that culture quietly disappear. The revenue drop in 2025 didn't just reveal a bad year. It exposed a broken system, one that can no longer survive the economic forces reshaping America's cities. Number 9. Popeyes. After the chicken sandwich craze of 2019, Popeyes seemed impossible to stop. The hype was everywhere, the lines were endless, and the brand rode viral momentum straight into the mainstream. But by 2025, that momentum finally ran out, and the numbers make it impossible to ignore. The chain posted one of its steepest sales declines in years, with multiple regions reporting sharp drops in both customer traffic and year-over-year revenue. For a brand built on buzz, 2025 became the moment the hype collapsed. Inflation hit Popeyes especially hard. Chicken prices surged, cooking oil costs jumped, and ongoing supply chain disruptions made consistent operations increasingly difficult. As expenses rose, menu prices followed, and customers pushed back. The chicken sandwich that once cost around $4 and sparked hour-long lines now sells for $6.50 to $7.50 in many cities. At that price, the excitement simply isn't there anymore. Behind the counter, franchise owners are under intense strain. Many locations are facing double-digit increases in operating costs, even as corporate leadership continues to push aggressive expansion goals. But opening new restaurants doesn't solve the deeper issue. Existing stores are losing money. On top of that, operators are being hit with mandatory remodel requirements ranging from $350,000 to $500,000, an investment many simply cannot afford. Several franchise groups have already hinted that downsizing, or exiting altogether, may be their only option. What makes Popeye's downturn so striking is how quickly it happened. In just a few short years, the brand flipped from a cultural phenomenon to a chain fighting to stay profitable. This wasn't caused by declining food quality. It was triggered by a business model overwhelmed by inflation, high employee turnover, and fragile supply chains. Customers can feel the shift. The once famous lines are gone. Dining rooms sit half empty. The buzz that defined Popeyes during its peak is fading fast. The sales collapse of 2025 made one thing clear. The chicken sandwich era is over, and the company doesn't have a replacement strategy strong enough to stop the decline. Popeyes isn't fading quietly. It's coming apart in plain sight, revealing the harsh reality that no amount of hype can withstand an economic storm this intense. Number 8. TGI Fridays. TGI Fridays once embodied American casual dining. Its restaurants were loud, busy, and full of life, with crowded dining rooms, thriving bar scenes, and a brand built around fun and celebration. For years, it felt like a permanent fixture of social life. But by 2025, that image shattered. The company suffered one of the most severe revenue declines in its history, with several regions reporting double-digit drops in sales that forced operators to face an uncomfortable truth. The core business model is starting to crack, and the trouble runs deeper than fewer customers walking through the doors. Large dining rooms now come with crushing rent costs, especially for older locations tucked inside malls or expensive suburban centers. Lease rates in those areas have climbed far beyond what a shrinking customer base can support. At the same time, staffing shortages have driven hourly wages sharply higher, pushing labor expenses into territory many stores simply can't survive. Over the past 10 years, more than 150 TGI Fridays locations have already closed. But 2025 marked a decisive shift. Franchise groups began shutting down restaurants proactively. Not because they were already failing, but because they could see failure coming under the weight of new economic realities. Bar sales, once the brand's financial backbone, have taken a major hit. Younger customers are drinking less, cutting back on spending, and choosing to stay home. Meanwhile, the menu has grown too expensive for families. A basic dinner can now easily reach $60 to $80, a price point many people simply won't accept. The loss goes beyond revenue. Fridays wasn't just a place to eat, it was a gathering spot, a symbol of the upbeat culture of the 1990s and early 2000s. Watching it decline feels unsettling because it points to something deeper. Americans are stepping away from the dining out culture that once defined everyday life. The sales collapse of 2025 wasn't a minor stumble. It was a flare shot into the sky. Today, TGI Fridays is fighting to stay alive, but the ground beneath it is eroding faster than the company can adapt. Number 7. Subway. There was a time when Subway felt unavoidable. Its stores seemed to be on every corner, in every shopping plaza, everywhere you looked. At its peak, the chain had more locations than McDonald's and Starbucks combined, making it one of the most visible food brands in America. But what followed has turned into one of the most dramatic collapses the industry has ever witnessed. Since 2016, Subway has shut down more than 6,000 locations, and in 2025, the situation worsened again. A fresh sales slump revealed just how vulnerable the remaining stores have become. While new ownership continues to promise a revival, franchise owners tell a very different story on the ground. Low-volume locations are barely hanging on. Inflation has driven food costs sharply upward, and many operators say whatever profit margins they once had are now gone. In 2025, several regions reported significant drops in sales, an especially alarming signal for a brand that already operates on razor-thin margins. Mandatory remodels have added another layer of pressure. Subway's Fresh Forward redesign can cost between $150,000 and $200,000 per location. For many franchise owners, that investment makes no sense when weekly sales have fallen well below sustainable levels. As a result, thousands of stores are stuck in limbo, too costly to upgrade, but not profitable enough to justify staying open long-term. Competition has also changed the landscape. Convenience stores, gas stations, and grocery chains now offer grab-and-go sandwiches at lower prices, pulling customers away from Subway. At the same time, foot traffic in suburban strip malls, once the chain's strongest territory, has steadily declined, making survival even harder. For years, Subway was the budget-friendly choice for millions of families. Now, a basic foot-long combo often costs $12 to $15. and customers are increasingly choosing to walk away. The sales decline in 2025 didn't just hurt the brand, it revealed the final phase of a long, slow downfall. A chain that once dominated the American food scene is now shrinking toward a future few ever imagined. Number 6. Burger King. Burger King's downturn stands out as one of the most troubling breakdowns in the fast food industry. In 2025, the chain took a major hit, posting sharp sales declines across multiple regions in the U.S., a setback that sped up a collapse that had already been unfolding for years. In just a single year, more than 400 Burger King locations shut down, marking one of the largest closure waves ever seen from a major fast food brand. The reasons behind the fallout are a damaging combination of financial stress and operational neglect. Many franchise locations are stuck in outdated buildings that badly need upgrades, yet corporate-mandated remodels can run well over $500,000 per store. Owners are caught in a no-win situation. They don't have the capital to rebuild, but without those upgrades, survival becomes nearly impossible. Several large franchise groups have already filed for bankruptcy, leaving entire regions dotted with dark, abandoned restaurants. Customer perception has shifted just as dramatically. Aging interiors, uneven service quality, and steadily rising menu prices have driven customers toward competitors. The Whopper, once known as a quick and affordable staple, now often costs between $7 and $9 in many cities. That price shift has stripped Burger King of the value image it spent decades building. The sales collapse of 2025 laid bare just how fragile the system had become. Many locations were already operating on thin margins, squeezed by high food costs and declining foot traffic. When the downturn hit, it pushed struggling stores past the breaking point. Some owners closed quietly, while others shut down overnight, leaving permanently closed signs taped to dusty windows. This isn't just about falling revenue, it's the erosion of a cultural heavyweight. For generations, Burger King stood as McDonald's chief rival, helping define the fast food battle in America. Now, it's a brand fighting to stay relevant in an economy that no longer supports its aging structure. And if the slide continues, 2025 may go down as the moment Burger King's long decline crossed the point of no return. Number 5. Boston Market. Boston Market isn't simply slipping, it's coming apart in full view of the public. At its peak, the chain operated more than 200 locations across the country. Today, that number has fallen to under 300. And in 2025, things took a dramatic turn for the worse. A massive sales decline exposed just how close the brand is to complete collapse. According to operators, the company is buckling under its own dysfunction. Supply chains have become unreliable, with some restaurants going days without basic ingredients like chicken. Staffing shortages are so severe that certain locations are forced to close early or cancel entire shifts. The instability has grown so routine that, throughout 2025, customers frequently showed up only to find handwritten notes on the door saying, "Closed today, sorry." The financial turmoil runs deep. Boston Market has faced lawsuits over unpaid wages, evictions from multiple properties, and sudden shutdowns that offered no warning at all. Franchise owners say revenue has dropped so sharply that covering essentials, rent, electricity, even food orders, has become impossible. The sales crash of 2025 didn't start these problems, but it dramatically sped them up, pushing the brand toward the edge faster than almost anyone expected. What makes this downfall especially jarring is how recognizable Boston Market once was. It represented comfort and consistency. Rotisserie chicken, mashed potatoes, cornbread. Simple, familiar meals, tied to a sense of normalcy and stability. Watching the chain deteriorate so openly, boarded-up doors, abandoned dining rooms, darkened storefronts, feels like witnessing the breakdown of something that used to be dependable. And it raises an unsettling question. If a straightforward, home-style restaurant can fall apart this quickly, what does that say about the economic pressure squeezing everything else? Boston Market isn't disappearing quietly. It's collapsing in plain sight. And the 2025 revenue crash pushed it dangerously close to the point of no return. Number 4. Pizza Hut. There was a time when Pizza Hut ruled American dining. The red roof buildings were instantly recognizable. The dining rooms were filled with families. Arcade games buzzed in the corner. and pizza night felt like an event. But that era has been fading for years, and the sharp sales drop in 2025 made it clear just how unstable the remaining locations have become. Hundreds of dine-in Pizza Hut restaurants have already closed, and many of those still operating are barely staying afloat. The core issue is straightforward. The business model that once powered Pizza Hut no longer works. Large dining rooms come with heavy rent and labor costs, and they simply can't compete in a world where customers increasingly opt for cheaper delivery and takeout options. Competitors have steadily chipped away at Pizza Hut's position. Domino's, Papa John's, and low-cost independent pizzerias have taken significant market share, while third-party delivery apps have cut deeply into already thin margins. Even carry-out-focused locations are struggling. On top of that, food inflation hit pizza chains especially hard. Rising costs for cheese, flour, and pepperoni have forced prices up, and customers are pushing back. A large pizza that once cost around $10 now often runs $17 to $20, sending many families in search of more affordable alternatives. In 2025, franchise owners reported some of the steepest revenue declines the chain has seen in years. Many say profits have dropped so low that required remodels, often costing $300,000 or more, are simply out of reach. As leases expire, dozens of operators are choosing to shut down instead of locking themselves into another long stretch of losses. For millions of Americans, Pizza Hut was more than a restaurant. It was part of growing up. Birthday parties, Little League celebrations, and Friday nights fueled by cheap pizza and soda live in people's memories. But nostalgia doesn't cover expenses. The sales collapse of 2025 confirmed what analysts had long suspected. Pizza Hut is no longer the powerhouse it once was. It's now a shrinking brand, struggling to survive in an economy that no longer supports the model it was built on. Number 3. Wendy's. For years, Wendy's marketed itself as the fresher, better quality option in the burger world, the chain that stood a step above its competitors. But in 2025, that carefully built image took a serious hit. The company reported a major sales decline, one of the steepest drops it has experienced in more than 10 years, and it exposed financial cracks spreading across the entire franchise network. Franchise operators are being squeezed from every direction. Beef prices climbed sharply, insurance costs rose, and utility bills jumped in multiple states. At the same time, in-store traffic has thinned, especially in suburban areas, where many Wendy's locations depend heavily on lunchtime crowds. With operating costs rising faster than menu prices, profit margins have steadily disappeared. Several franchise groups have already warned that store closures may follow if the downturn doesn't ease. Adding to the strain is Wendy's aggressive modernization push. Corporate leadership is demanding digital menu boards, redesigned dining rooms, and upgraded drive-thru systems, projects that can cost more than $500,000 per restaurant. For owners already watching profits shrink, these requirements feel unrealistic. Some have postponed upgrades indefinitely, while others are quietly preparing to leave the system altogether. The shift is unsettling because Wendy's once represented reliability. The square burgers, the frosty, the familiar drive-thru experience, it all stood for consistency. But the 2025 slump revealed a harsher truth. Customers are cutting back, choosing cheaper alternatives or skipping fast food entirely as everyday expenses rise across the economy. This sales decline wasn't a random dip, it was a warning sign. Wendy's is now operating in an environment where its traditional advantages, quality, branding, and familiarity, are no longer enough to ensure stability. The chain isn't collapsing in dramatic fashion. Instead, it's fading quietly through thinning margins, unnoticed closures, aging locations, and franchise owners who can no longer make the math work. And 2025 may ultimately be remembered as the year America realized that this once steady giant was starting to lose its hold. Number 2. McDonald's. For decades, McDonald's was considered bulletproof, the one fast food chain everyone believed could weather anything. Recessions, inflation, labor shortages, changing consumer tastes. It was assumed McDonald's would always adapt and survive. But in 2025, that confidence finally cracked. The company reported a significant sales decline, and it wasn't the kind that could be brushed off as a seasonal dip. Executives quietly acknowledged that this downturn ran much deeper. The warning signs had been there well before the numbers became public. In major cities, some locations began closing earlier than usual to avoid rising crime and the steady loss of late-night traffic. At the same time, labor shortages drove wages higher, while soaring urban rents became increasingly difficult to justify. Several franchise operators admitted that their stores now generate less profit than they did 10 years ago, despite sharp increases in menu prices. A basic meal that once cost $6 or $7 now regularly runs $12 to $14, pushing away the price-conscious customers McDonald's relies on most. The impact of the 2025 sales slump was most severe in large metropolitan areas. Drive-through traffic weakened, mobile app promotions stopped delivering meaningful boosts, and operators reported declines across multiple times of day. Franchise groups that manage dozens of locations suddenly found themselves discussing store closures, an idea that would have sounded absurd not long ago for the world's most powerful fast food system. Even required remodels have become a breaking point. A full modernization can cost more than $1 million per restaurant, and many franchise owners simply can't justify that expense while sales are trending in the wrong direction. Tensions between corporate leadership and franchise operators have been rising, and in several markets, locations have already shut down without any public explanation. What makes this situation so unsettling is what McDonald's represents. If the largest, most efficient, and most globally recognized fast food chain in the world is starting to show cracks, then every other brand is far more exposed than it appears. The 2025 downturn didn't bring McDonald's down, but it proved that even giants can bleed. And once that vulnerability becomes visible, the entire industry feels the ripple effects. Number 1. Red Lobster. Red Lobster's downfall stands apart from almost anything the American restaurant industry has seen in recent decades. This wasn't a gradual slide or a quiet retreat from relevance. It was a full-scale collapse, fast, chaotic, and deeply destructive. The massive sales drop in 2025 didn't start the crisis, but it poured fuel on the fire and sent everything spiraling out of control. By the middle of 2025, dozens of Red Lobster locations had shut down with little to no warning. Some closed overnight. Employees showed up for work only to find the doors locked and the lights off. Inside, dining rooms were left exactly as they were, menus still sitting on tables, chairs tucked under booths, until liquidation crews arrived days later to strip out equipment. The scenes felt frozen in time, like the business simply stopped existing without notice. Behind the scenes, the financial reality was disastrous. Red Lobster was suffocating under crushing lease agreements, soaring seafood costs, and years of poor strategic decisions. The now infamous endless shrimp promotions became a symbol of desperation, bleeding millions in lost profit. Vendors weren't being paid on schedule, and some restaurants ran out of key menu items for days because invoices went unpaid. The revenue collapse of 2025 finally pushed the system past its breaking point. Sales plunged across nearly every region, exposing how much customer demand had already weakened. Inflation forced menu prices higher, and loyal guests began walking away. A meal for two that once cost around $40 now often climbs to $70 or $80, turning Red Lobster into an occasional luxury many working families can no longer justify. The fallout has been emotional as well as financial. For generations, Red Lobster stood for celebration, anniversaries, graduations, family dinners, moments that mattered. Watching it fall apart so violently feels like seeing a piece of American culture torn out at the roots. This wasn't just a rough year or a temporary setback. It was the unraveling of a national icon, and perhaps the clearest warning yet that the restaurant industry is buckling under an economy everyday Americans can no longer afford. Red Lobster didn't slowly fade away. It detonated, and the shockwaves from that explosion are still rippling outward.